dass das ein bisschen aufbleibt, dass wir ein bisschen Luft haben.
Well, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you join us today. Thank you for coming to this great Stamp X talk. Welcome, welcome. Greetings to all of our philatelic friends all over the world. We'll just give a few seconds before we get started just to make sure that everybody's in the room and situated. So happy to have all of you join us, and we hope that you're enjoying the show thus far. There's so much to see, the dealer bourse, all the chat rooms, incredible talks from philatelists all over the world. What a treat during this extremely interesting time in humanity. Well, with that, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, and welcome to Stamp X Talks. My name is Heidi Rhodes, and on behalf of the American Philatelic Society, I'd like to welcome you to this presentation, Mixed Franking Covers, How Common Stamps Can Make a Rarity. Our speakers for this session are Mr. Ray Simpson and Mr. Karl Louis. Ray has been a collector for over 60 years, when as a lad he began claiming the mail that dropped through his door. Both he and Karl share a penchant for Great Britain Victorian mixed covers. Karl began collecting penny reds at age 11. When he met his bride-to-be, she asked him about his hobbies, and eager to share them with her, he showed her his collection of penny reds, to which she replied, "They all look similar." Nevertheless, the two have remained wed for over 60 years. Now, before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items to take care of. Today's session is a webinar, and as such, all video and audio of attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. Please feel free to use the chat box to engage with other attendees and the Q&A box for your questions to Mr. Simpson and Mr. Louis. And with that, let's begin this session of Stamp X Talks, Mixed Franking Covers, How Common Stamps Can Make a Rarity. Thank you, Ray and Karl.
Okay. Well, Karl, are you going to tell us how you got really interested into mixed franking covers?
Yeah, it's a short story. When I started to build up my card index register, I found out that certain aspects in philately are much rarer than the price of the items would tell us. And I found out that mixed frankings are something highly interesting to collect. I started to do so, and I wondered that it was not so popular in Britain. So when I showed my collection some years ago, a few years ago, I showed it to a colleague of coin filler in Zurich, Greg Todd, and a British. I showed him my collection, and he said, "Oh, Karl, this is nice, but a very typical German collection or a German way of collecting." So this is how I started to collect mixed frankings.
Great, Karl. Well, I remember we had a chat at StampX, and you said to me that these were very, very interesting, and we ought to, I ought to write a book about it. You challenged me to try and find a particular cover where two very common British stamps. Now, can you tell us which two very common British stamps you had in mind?
Yes, I remember very well. A few years ago, Ray, when we met at StampX, I said, "Hey, now you have finished your book of the stamp perforations. You cannot sit at home, and so you should write another book." You remember?
I do.
You said, "Karl, what topic do you think?" And I said, "Mixed frankings." And you said, "Well, I never thought about mixed frankings." And I said, "I give you a challenge." And I said, "You know the penny perforated stars. You know the penny red plate numbers, two absolutely common stamps. Not very easy to find one on cover. You can get here at StampX hundreds, if not thousands, but find the two stamps together on one cover." You remember?
I do.
And what did you do?
Well, I looked around Stampex, and I hate to admit failure, but I couldn't find one. However, immediately after that talk, it was getting close to closing time on that day, and I went around the stalls and I thought I'd just have a little look, and I actually found quite an interesting one, and it had a penny Venetian Red and a penny Lilac on the same cover. And I thought, shall I buy that? If we're going to do something, I better understand these things. And so I hummed and hawed, and I eventually bought it. And now we've done all our work, I find it's one of only a handful of similar covers. So it's almost as good as the one you were talking about. So I think we'd better show these folk what the sort of covers we're talking about, don't you?
Yeah, yeah.
At our presentation.
So this was a start.
Yeah, and you must start. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Good. Do you think we should start our presentation to the topic?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So then, let us introduce to Victorian Mixed-Franking Covers, and to describe the topic we are talking about, and which we will gladly give answers to any questions later on. Covers bearing different types of stamps are described as mixed frankings. In our book, we are concentrating on a specific group of mixed frankings of special interest, those with two or more stamps that illustrate the transition from one issue to the next. This short PowerPoint display focuses on the Victorian stamps of Great Britain, which were issued between 1840 and 1902. All are illustrated by relevant covers. Most of them are what we call gold standard covers. A gold standard cover shows a stamp from one issue used together with its immediate successor of the same denomination. For example, a penny with another penny stamp. Okay, now the first item we are going to show you is a mixed franking from the 1840 to 1841 transition. Security issues of the 1841 penny black and tuppence blue stamps quickly became obvious. Within weeks of issue, experiments began with more fugitive printing inks and an obliteration ink that was difficult to remove. Nobody could miss a change from the black to the red ink for the penny value on screen. A typical example posted originally with the penny black. It was then redirected to the original addressee with the penny red. This mixed franking is scarce, but not particularly rare. Thus, it is greatly sought after. Also, the unpopular 1840 Mulready postal stationery was quickly replaced by the penny pink and tuppence blue postal stationery in the spring of 1841. But 1 penny Mulreadys from the remaining stocks were often uprated with a single 1841 penny red, either to pay the 1 ounce rate or for redirection. Unusually, this redirected cover was redirected a second time, but unpaid, and charged another penny on delivery. So I think, Ray, here you take over, because we're getting to the imperforate to perforated issues, and this is your topic, of course.
Okay, well, thank you, Karl. We'll carry on the story with the sort of remaining developments of the lining penny and tuppenny line engraved stamps that Karl has introduced us to. And the first development was the change from imperforate stamps to perforated stamps, which was actually a major development. And it was first seen on the British stamps in 1850. the 1850 stamps came from Archer's experimental perforated stamps, and they are pretty scarce on cover, but in mixed frankings with imperforate stamps like this are very rare. And this is one of only 7 recorded covers. And these were the very first stamps in the whole world to be perforated. We then move on to the officially perforated penny and twopenny stamps, which were first issued in 1854. And quite a few imperforate and perforated frankings are recorded, but they are scarce. And the 1 penny imperf, 1 penny perf combination on screen is one of just 29 examples recorded. However, the twopenny combination that follows is much scarcer, with only 11 examples recorded. Only 3 of those were posted in 1854, and the one on screen is one of them, with stamps paying the 4p or 2 ounce internal rate of postage. Now, many of the surviving imperforate, perforate mixed frankings involve combinations of the penny and twopenny stamps, though with one exception, we really don't have much time today to go into all of that. But the exception is this March 1859 cover, which has a pair of imperforate twopenny blues at the top. There's also an imperforate penny red at the bottom right, together with a perforated penny rose red. And together, these stamps pay the correct 6p rate to India via Southampton. Now, explain it if you can. I can't. I move on now from the introduction of perforation to perforation changes that occurred between 1855 and 58. Now, don't get worried, because there were only 2 perforation gauges used on British postage stamps at this time. One was perforation 16, the other was perforation 14. When it all started, perforation 16 was the appropriate gauge, and that measurement is based upon the number of holes across the top and bottom of the stamp, 16 holes for perf 16. But the closeness of those perforation holes caused a problem. It caused damage to the components of the machines, and it interfered with productivity, and that was a no-no. So it was decided to switch to perforation 14, and the transition took place during 1855. So mixed franking perforations were inevitable, and both the twopenny and the penny stamps were affected. The examples with the twopenny stamps are rare, and so that's what we're going to concentrate on today. And the first of these examples, well, it just takes my breath away, because the central stamp is an imperforate twopenny blue from plate 3, but it's flanked by perforated stamps, one from plate 5, perf 16, and the other from plate 6, perf 14. So to put this cover into context, there are only 8 other twopenny blue covers with a mixture of perf 16 and perf 14 stamps. This one just has that slight added bonus of the imperforate. So, well, when everybody had just got used to perf 14 as the new standard, perf 16 made an unexpected comeback in 1857-58. It's now accepted that the priority being given to the manufacture of a new perforating machine resulted in delays to the routine servicing of the standard perf 14 punch sets. And so they pressed the old 16 punch sets into action on a temporary basis. Now, the penny combination on screen is one of only 9 gold standard covers recorded. It's a shame one of the stamps is upside down, but I can't help that. However, the companion tuppenny blue cover is even rarer, because this is the only example so far known. Both stamps are from plate 6 and were used to pay the basic fourpence rate to France. Now, the final section on line engraved, and then I'm going to hand back to Karl, is the stars with plates. Now, that was the one he was talking about earlier on, when he told me I wouldn't find one, and he was right. Now, how this came about is that from 1841 through to 1858, the design of the penny and tuppenny line engraved stamps had stars in the top corners and letters in the bottom corners. The stars were a kind of ornament. They weren't really stars, but we call them stars. But to combat fraud, the stamps were then redesigned with letters at the top and the bottom, and with plate numbers in the lattice work at the sides. This change was first made to the tuppenny stamps in 1858. Examples of the old and new stamps used together are rare, and this fourpenny internal postage cover from Shrewsbury to Warrington is one of the star items. Apart from this, only 4 others are recorded. And then, as we saw briefly, we'll go back to it, the slide now with the penny stamps on. And the issue of the penny stamps was delayed until 1864. Both the penny stars and plates exist in their billions, as Karl said at the beginning, but it's not easy to find a cover with both of them on together. Most mixed frankings featuring these stamps involve single copies. Just for the fun of it, we're showing you a registered book post label paying a 6pence rate, and it's a notable exception. To date, only 18 mixed frankings of the penny stamps have been recorded, though more probably exist somewhere. Karl, it's back to you now to take us on to other methods of printing and the covers that emanated from them.
Okay, thank you, Ray. So coming to the embossed issues and the surface printed issues in 1856, we had that the 1 shilling and the 6pence adhesive stamps were being replaced by surface printed stamps. And in consequence, mixed frankings of any of the embossed stamps with the surface printed stamps are quite rare, because the new 6pence surface printed stamps were not issued until late October 1856. Replacing the 6pence embossed, there was little opportunity only for them to be used together on one cover, which we can see here. 3 such gold standard 6pence embossed and 6pence surface printed covers, like this one here, have, to our knowledge, survived. Surface printed stamps issues with the corner letter changes. For unexplained reasons, the first surface printed stamps issued between 1855 and 1862 had no corner letters. Small white corner letters were added in 1862. More legible large white corner letters were introduced in 1865. And finally, there was a change to colored letters starting in 1873. These changes occurred over quite a long period. This resulted in many mixed frankings of old and new stamps used together. But it is really difficult to find old and new stamps of the same denomination used together in a mixed franking. The cover on screen is the only recorded example of the 1862 fourpence with small corner letters used with the 1865 fourpence large corner letters. This is followed by the 6pence small letters used with the 6pence large corner letters. Only 3 such comparable covers are recorded by us. The challenge continues with the transition from the white to colored corner letters. This group offers 2 more gold standard covers. This cover to Palermo in Sicily is with 2 3-pence stamps well deserves the description of rare. That is followed by the 4-pence value combination cover to Melbourne. Only 3 such examples of this. White corner letters and colored corner letters are recorded. Getting to the surface printed stamps, design and color changes. This section begins with a cover that not only displays a change from white to colored letters, but also to a striking color change. It so happened that for the 6-pence value, the color change and the change to colored letters coincided. Again, a very rare cover. I think, Ray, it's the only one we have recorded. And yeah, one of another gold standard. Ray, I think from here, I hand over again to you to the, we have one more, sorry.
You have one more, yeah.
One more, yeah, sorry. Forgive me. So this is the same of the color changes, which we just saw for the 6-pence. We have also for the 4-pence. And this is the change from the 4-pence vermilion to the 4-pence olive. And again, this is the only recorded example of this mixed franking. Ray, and you take over from here.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Karl. I'm in great danger of succumbing to the temptation of envy when I see those wonderful covers from which the participants in this seminar will realize that most of them don't belong to me. However, right, well, we move on then from that period effectively up to about 1880, and from 1880, pretty well everything began to change at a fairly rapid pace. And it's perhaps not the most collected area of Victorian philately. However, there are some very interesting covers coming out of this period. And I'm starting with the consolidated contract issue of 1880 to 1884. Now, 40 years on from the penny black, new concerns about the security of the line engraved stamps prompted a change to surface printing with much more fugitive inks. And De La Rue acquired the contract for all the low value stamps. When I said consolidated contract, it simply meant all the low value stamps were being printed by De La Rue together with some certain postal stationery. Now, the penny red, as we see on this cover, was the first to be replaced. And its successor was the penny Venetian Red. Now, on this cover, you get a very nice copy of the penny red plate on the left, and on the right, under the label, is a rather heavily cancelled penny Venetian Red. But it's fitting that this cover is shown because not only are the two stamps used together, but the added bonus is that the penny red is from a plate that many people would have heard of, plate 225, the last and rarest of all the penny red plates. Now, it wasn't only the penny red that was replaced, but the other 3 values, the halfpenny, the penny halfpenny, and the twopenny, as De La Rue geared up to the additional workload. And all the other line engraved stamps are recorded used with stamps from the 1880 issue, but not generally with those of the same denomination. The only exception is the cover about to be shown with the old and new halfpenny stamps commercially used in a mixed franking. Now, I have to apologize for the state of the green halfpenny stamp, but these are both very, very common stamps, but this is the only recorded example of them being used in combination. So maybe you can go and look around all these Stampex stalls and see whether you can find another one. And if you do, let me know, because I'd be very interested. Right, well, we move on from the consolidated contract issue to the unified issue, another very boring title. What that means is it was an administrative change brought about by a new Act of Parliament, which authorized the use of postage stamps for both postage and revenue purposes. Previously, they were separate. And certain existing revenue stamps could also, that will stop in a moment. It stopped now, good. I'll start again. What it meant was that both postage stamps were used for revenue purposes, and certain existing revenue stamps could also be used for postage. But for this to work across the board, new fugitive inks were required. And the first of the completely new unified stamps was the penny Lilac, one of the commonest Victorian stamps in existence. But surprisingly, Mixed Frankings, illustrating the transition from the penny Venetian Red to the penny Lilac, are very scarce. And this was the cover that I went out and bought immediately after talking to Karl. So you really have it by virtue of his prompting me to start looking for these things. Now, the stamps produced in the 1880s include the 1884 lilac and green issue, and one that collectors don't seem to like very much. And really, we've got nothing to show you here, because although there are mixed frankings of the lilac and green with other non-contemporary stamps, they're pretty scarce, and there are no same denomination issues with either the Victorian stamps or anything that preceded the issue. So it's one, perhaps an area that might repay a bit of diligent exploration. Right, well, finishing post now in sight, because we move on to the last of the Victorian issues, the Jubilee issue. And it was the deficiencies of that lilac and green issue that quickly led to a rethink and to their replacement in less than 3 years. The Jubilee issue that replaced them survived largely intact for 14 years. There were 2 additions to the original range, the fourpenny halfpenny and the tenpence, and a couple of colour changes to the halfpenny and to the shilling. Most of the values survived until 1902, until the King Edward VII replacements were ready. And this cover, showing the colour change for the halfpenny from the original vermilion on the right to the blue-green on the left, is actually rather less common than I certainly thought, and is worth searching for. There are a few covers recorded, some of which are most distinctly philatelic, but it probably means that they're underrepresented, and maybe you'll be fortunate enough to find examples as you look around. And finally, I'm going to just finish with mixed reign frankings, Queen Victoria and King Edward VII. I'm only going to show one. The mixed reign frankings from that period provide promising opportunities for future study, because it wasn't until the late spring of 1902 that the King Edward VII stamps finally replaced all their Victorian predecessors. So mixed frankings were inevitable. And amongst the lower values, interesting covers are undoubtedly there to be found. We're aware of covers, the combination of Queen Victoria and King Edward VII, for the halfpenny, for the penny, this is the penny here, and for twopenny halfpenny stamps. Of course, technically, that penny wasn't a Jubilee issue, it came out before, but it served right the way through. So it's an interesting combination. And there may well be more to be found, although we've only found 5 examples so far. So again, I think opportunities may exist. Right, well, this presentation, which is really now at its end, is just a basic introduction to the world of mixed frankings. There are, of course, all sorts of variations on the theme that we've presented, and we explore the subject much more thoroughly in the book that we've just produced, which, strangely enough, happens to be on your screen. We hope, however, that the subject has been one of interest, entertainment, and information, and that it may have encouraged you to explore the possibilities more deeply. So thank you for your presence and thank you for your patience. But before I go, I just want to say thank you to Andre Schneider, who's a colleague and friend of Karl, who has both designed and produced this PowerPoint presentation. I think he's done an excellent job, and I hope you agree. So with that, I want to take you back now to the capable hands of Heidi, who's going to try to steer us through the question and answer session. I only hope you've got some questions.
We certainly
Not sure necessarily we've got answers, but there we go.
We definitely do, and thank you so much for this informative presentation, gentlemen. Friends, if you have a question for our presenters, feel free to enter them into the Q&A box, please. The Q&A box, that'll help us be able to track those questions. And we will begin by reading questions that have already been submitted. Thanks, friends. Okay. Is there an example of mixed franking red and black stamps together? So meaning the penny black and the penny red.
Well, yes, I think we showed you one early on. Indeed, the very first cover. In fact, it's rather worrying to say that these are not very uncommon. They're very scarce, but they're not that uncommon. Though you'll probably have to dig very deep to get one because, as you know, the penny black always attracts a huge premium because it was the very first postage stamp ever to be produced. Karl, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I would like to add that in case such a combination is being offered, you should purchase it only with a reliable certificate confirming that the combination is genuinely used. I think this is important. And I can only repeat it many times.
Expertise, expertise.
Yes.
Here we go. The rarity of stamp issues of the same denomination used together seems to speak of the fact that one issue was exhausted before the next issue was released, and that the stamps which are found together depends upon retention of old stamps by the people who bought and saved the stamps for later usage. Question?
There's a question. Right, well, yes, I can comment on that, and Karl probably will as well. There is a lot of truth in that statement, but it doesn't allow for the fact that businesses and individuals had their own stocks of stamps. I mean, particularly businesses like solicitors and so on, they would probably buy stamps by the sheet, and they didn't always go, they weren't always used up very quickly. And in fact, some stamps, and I single out the tuppenny blue stamps actually particularly, were very slow moving, particularly in some of the more remote offices in the country where they had them. And we find the tuppenny stamps being used together with newer stamps, for example, of a different perforation gauge or something of that kind, quite frequently. And I think it's true to say that you won't find it too difficult to find a tuppenny blue imperforate stamp used at least in the early months of 1855, quite a long while. after the perforated stamps had been introduced.
I would like to add one aspect. In many cases of these gold standard covers or mixed frankings, the older stamp looks not so fresh as the new one. This is because in many cases it is what we call a pocket stamp. It was still in the pocket of the sender, or it was under the table. There's another unused stamp still to use, and this is why in many cases you have to accept that the older stamp of a mixed franking is not in an absolutely fresh and perfect quality.
And I will make one further point. I agree with you entirely, Karl. I'll make one further point. I know of one firm, Cross and Blackwell, and I know the stamps were used by them because they have their perf initials in the stamp. Quite often seem to use old stamps as much as 4 or 5 years later. So I rather guess their stock control wasn't particularly good. But these were the things that happened, and I can point to at least 2 examples in my own collection where that was the case. So it wasn't just a quick turnover at post offices that we're talking about. It was all sorts of quite unpredictable events from business and individual users.
Okay, Heidi?
So I think we've covered that, Heidi.
Okay. Were some of the mixed franking covers created by, for philatelists? Is there any way of telling this?
Yeah, possibly. I may answer this. So stamp collecting started in about the earliest stamp collector we saw in the 1860s, 1870s, and in the 1880s, stamp collecting began to be very popular. And I think especially in the 1880s, we see a lot of mixed frankings, which were certainly motivated to combine the different stamps by stamp collectors. And not only different stamps of different issues, but also when I think in the early 1880s, possibly in the 1881, the fiscal stamps became valid for using on normal letters, then we see a lot of combinations of stamps of different issues and the mixture on the same cover with fiscal stamps. So indeed, there were many covers starting from the 1880s, which were motivated to produce by philatelists, by the stamp collectors. Yes.
Do philatelically contrived combinations occur at the end of the Victorian period?
Well, I mean, indeed. I mean, as Karl has explained, I think these do proliferate from about the 1880s. I don't think they're very common. Indeed, I'm not even sure that I remember any, but I may be wrong, from the earlier periods. But I mean, it's true that collectors used to like to play, or not collectors, even users like to play about with stamps. I know of a Mulready cover, a famous one that was sent to Boston with a mixture of tuppenny blues and penny blacks, all very artistically arranged. So playing with stamps, as happened in the 1880s with the contrived ones, does happen. I mean, it's a fact of life. If they paid the right money, though, to get the letter to the recipient, well, then they are perfectly valid items of mail. The question that all of us will ask ourselves is whether we rate these less highly or more highly than other, what I've described in my talk anyway, as commercial covers. is very much a matter of taste and decision by individual collectors, I think. But it's a fact of life, so you know we live with it, and we must make our own judgments.
Is the combination of 1840 2D and 1841 2D known?
Sorry.
What combination? Can you, I didn't understand.
Yes, I didn't quite catch that.
Excuse me, is the combination of 1840 2D and 1841 2D known?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Would you like to answer, Ray?
Yes, I haven't got my copy of the book to hand, but yes, it is. But it's very, very scarce. The tuppenny blue combination is exceedingly scarce.
If I remember right, we have 5 or 6 such combinations known.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah, yeah.
Right, thanks, friends, for all of these questions. We have a healthy Q&A box. The amounts on the covers are high mainly because they are being sent abroad. Is that where you have to collect them from? So do you have to collect these from abroad?
Yeah, I think it's true that that the higher the rate of postage, the more likely it is that you will find combinations of covers, whether it's combinations that reflect the development in the way that we have described is a different question. But a high proportion, I think, of the covers that we have listed in the book are covers that attracted high rates of postage and were sent abroad, or alternatively were covers sent from British post offices abroad, as in Chile and Argentina and the West Indies and other places, back to the UK, because those British post offices had stocks of stamps that probably moved pretty slowly, and certainly much more slowly than the equivalent stamps in the UK, and covers from those territories often display mixed frankings.
I would like to add, Ray, that the later we come, in the 1870s, 1880s possibly, the inland postage rate on letters was very low, and you don't find any inland letter rates with 4p or 6p, except for, let's say, register. But the normal letters, there were no high denominations required for an inland letter. So you don't find these mixed rankings. And I think the later we come with our mixed rankings, the more we have foreign destination covers. This for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Not in the beginning. Let's say if we have the imperf and the perforated mixed rankings, they are normally inland covers. But later on, we have 95%, if not more, going to foreign destinations.
Yes, yes, that's true. Oh, for the days of cheap postage, long gone.
Yeah, you're right.
Moving on. Did all line engraved stamps become invalid for postage, as did the 1D SG 16 or 166, 1D Venetian Red? I have a registered cover with penny black, penny red, and 1D Venetian Red used on 31st of May, 1901. Right.
I can answer that question absolutely, yes. The Victorian stamps there was an invalidation of, no, that's the wrong word. It's a demonetization of early Victorian stamps did come into force. Yes, it was, I think, in 1901.
1901, 1902.
Yes, that's right. But so that excluded all but the current issue Victorian stamps. And the current issue Victorian stamps at that stage were the Jubilee issue stamps and also the high value stamps of that period. And I may be wrong, but one or two others as well, and postal stationery and so on. And those those Victorian stamps were not invalidated until sometime in 1915. I think it was June, but that's from memory, and it might be wrong as to the precise date, but it was 1915. And so you can find Victorian stamps and King George V stamps used in combination. And in fact, I have one or two covers where with King George V stamps and on Victorian postal stationery. So there were two demonetizations, as it were, in that period.
Let me just add a little story. As far as I know, the famous £5 orange from 1882 was still available at post offices around 1920. Good buy there.
Yeah.
So they were still valid. Heidi.
And along that same thought, and pardon me if I butcher this, but up to what date would the Queen Victoria stamps be used with King Edward VI stamps?
They can't.
Excuse me.
They can't. Not King Edward.
Kevii.
Oh, seventh.
Good.
Seventh. All right. Okay. Yeah. Up to that date in 1915 that I mentioned.
That's what I thought you guys were. That was a great segue from your answer into this question, and I skipped around. Here we go. Karl and Ray, do you have a card index for this mixed frankings? Can you send pics still to? Can we send pictures to you for updating your index? I guess that's a Karl.
Yes, perhaps. Ray, may I answer?
Sure.
I think that a very large number of the mixed rankings we have recorded and listed in our new handbook is based on records from my card index. And for more than, I think, I very early realized when starting building up my card index 32 years ago now, I very early realized that mixed rankings are quite rare. And whenever I saw one on an auction, in a dealer's list, or wheresoever, I listed them, I recorded them in my card index, and I would be glad to receive more mixed rankings from collectors worldwide to add to my card index. And whoever will send me an illustration of a mixed ranking, he will get an answer from my side if I have it recorded earlier, and if so, where it was recorded and when, and possibly how many more do exist if it is one of those mixed rankings which are not already listed in our new book. I think we are for many mixed ranking issues, Ray, I think we are quite complete, especially for the early issues.
Yes, Karl, I'd agree with that. The earliest issues, I think, it's one can never say never, but the early issues, I think, have been pretty well gone over, sifted, sorted, and anything of interest is known about. But we are very conscious that from the middle period, from, sorry, I'm banging my mic, from the middle period from the 1850s, certainly 1860s onwards, there are probably quite a lot of mixed franking covers that we don't know about. I mean, if you publish a book like this, I mean, you know, you do it in full knowledge that there will be plenty of others that can be reported and will be found and recorded. And yes, we would welcome any input from anyone listening and anyone who isn't listening to update and to improve the database. And our intention is that at some point we would publish some kind of supplement showing additions to this. Now, when and where and what form it takes, we have no idea, but that's the intention. So yes, but please let us have information, and preferably scans.
And you can, at least for StampX friends, if you did have something that you'd like to submit, you can visit Mr. Louis' booth at A13. That's Home of Great Collectors, and you can begin a chat with him. That's A13. Would you recommend collectors of other countries to try and build collections of mixed frankings? It may be difficult to find such covers for countries like India, which I collect, due to lower volume of mails.
Yes, I think. What we've done in the Victorian context is one that reflects our own interests and our own collections, and also what we know a little bit about. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that wherever stamps have been issued, and particularly in their millions in places like India, that mixed frankings abound, and in British philately, I know that at least one friend of mine has put together quite a nice little collection of later material, not stepping on our Victorian toes, but of the reigns subsequently. So yeah, I think these are undervalued, under recognized, and as Karl said, he found very quickly that he understood that these were very rare on cover. Now, sure, I'm not suggesting that these covers will ever be worth thousands and thousands of pounds, but I do think they will carry a significant premium as people come to realize that not only are these interesting in themselves, but they can be very valuable in illustrating in an exhibition or a display, or even just your private collection, how things moved from one issue to another issue. And this provides a bridge, provides a time capsule showing those changes and developments. And I think that it will repay anybody who salts a few of these things away significantly well in future years.
Ray, let me add for the India. So the India was as an example. There are so wonderful mixed frankings of India around, of the litho imperforate issues with the de la Rue delivered perforated issues. They are wonderful. And also, I must say, I get on my table a lot of philatelic, nice philatelic items, and I can tell you, I'm always fascinated by these colorful mixed frankings from all the philatelic collecting fields, especially in the 19th century.
Take this question how I think this is a nice segue. Are mixed franking covers postal history or philately?
Pass. I think there are elements of both. Probably it derives from a study of stamps more than covers, but by golly, you learn a lot about postal history when you come to investigate them.
Let me say, I think philately is postal history. Even the normal stamp is part of the history, part of the postal history, because it's being issued for a certain reason by a certain postal administration. And so even the normal stamp is postal history. So also a mixed franking is postal history.
Yeah.
Great. I always love that question. It's good. Would you regard postal stationery cutouts and stamp combinations as mixed frankings?
A clear yes. Nothing else to say.
Okay, sehr gut. Sehr gut. All right, here we go.
Would you see it different? No, we have also recorded some of these, huh? Have we?
Yes. Yeah. I guess I'm not a fan of cutouts, but that doesn't nullify them. It's just that I'm not interested in them. But yeah, these are mixed frankings. Those bits of stationery that are being cut out are the bit that carries the value, and they are a stamp, and therefore, if they are used with other sorts of stamps, then it constitutes a mixed franking.
On that note, with what constitutes a mixed frank, does the value of the stamps on cover need to be the same, for example, 2D and 2D, to qualify for mixed franking?
No, most definitely not. And in many cases, they just don't exist like that anyway. Or at least if they do exist, we don't know about them. And we've looked into it pretty thoroughly as far as the Victorian era is concerned. I would only say that we have highlighted those as being so, if you like, the easiest element of mixed frankings to demonstrate. But you will see in that book, you can even see on the cover, representation of the cover at the bottom left item is a 5-shilling Queen Victoria stamp used with a 1 penny and a 6pence Edward stamp. That's as wonderful a mixed franking as I know, but of course it's not the same denomination.
Carl, anything else? Or did Ray handle that?
No, this is, if it is the same denomination, this is what we call the so-called gold standard.
Yeah.
All right, friends, we're going to wrap up. And if you have additional questions that we weren't able to get to, please go ahead and visit Mr. Louis at A13, and at least you will have a contact with him. We'll finish up with this final question. I think you used my cover of 1D Red 1864 with 1D Venetian Red 1880 to Denmark, but I have one with the 1864 used, then redirected with 1880 Venetian. Would this be classed as a mixed use?
Most certainly.
It's simply a mixed franking redirected cover. All right, what would you say? Mixed franking redirected cover.
Yeah, that was the not dissimilar from the penny red and penny black used together that we showed first up. It was a redirected cover which required an additional stamp to get it to its recipient. So yeah, every time redirections, redirected covers, very much a mixed franking.
All right, well, I know that we still had some questions left, and I understand how that can be frustrating, but again, you can go visit our friends over at booth A13. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We will conclude this StampX talk. We thank you for your attendance, and we ask you that you join us in thanking Mr. Simpson and Mr. Louis for this enlightening presentation. There's much more to come at StampX, and we encourage you to explore this interactive virtual show. We're excited to announce that Karl Louis will be available at the Corinthilla booth and invites you to send in your stamp or cover to have it reviewed via the Karl Louis Card Index to establish its prominence. Appointments are first come, first served, and will be held Saturday between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. That's British Standard Time. Go to booth A13, home of the great collectors, and begin a chat with Mr. Louis. For more stamp talks, visit the Spink Auditorium, where you can click to view the schedule. We hope to see you this evening at 8 o'clock British Standard Time for Books at the Royal, presented by Mr. Charles Oppenheim. Thank you for joining us, and on behalf of the American Philatelic Society, we thank you for your attendance, and we look forward to meeting you. Please navigate over to our booth and introduce yourself. Gary Lowe, Scott Tiffany, myself, and other members of the American Philatelic staff are on hand to chat. Join the APS now and receive special StampX membership pricing. Digital and international memberships are available. Visit stamps.org to become part of 134 years of fellowship in the hobby. Thanks again to all. Take care and enjoy the show. Thank you. Bye, friends.
Thank you.